Okay, so for the next part, or part 2 rather, what we need to do is make the red stitching, and I printed off a picture of a baseball. So what we're going to do is we are going to surface stitch 2 curved lines onto our blanket, and now what I've done is I've made a guide with just a scrap piece of red yarn. I'm going to take another piece of red yarn, and now this is just a 4-weight. It's not the one I'm going to be using for the actual surface stitching. I'm just making a guide, and I tried just free-handing a top stitch, but I just couldn't get it to work the way I wanted it to, so I ended up just cutting a piece, making a guide, and then I'm going to sew an actual guide along this line. And then what I'm going to do with my thicker red yarn, my 6 bulky weight, is I'm going to surface crochet along the guide with it, and then we just pull the guide out when we're done. So you're just going to thread your needle with any color yarn really, and you'll go in through the slip stitch that we made, and don't pull too much through because you're not going to do this very tight, so you can keep pulling it through. It's not going to be tight where you can't pull it. And then so what you want to do is just go along and kind of stitch through along this guide. And so I'm going to just carefully fold up my work and zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. And so we're just going to go a couple stitches in. And so your main idea is you just want to go along this guide. And like I said, the reason I did this is I tried to freehand a curved line, and I couldn't get it to work properly. So that's why I ended up using this as like a little guide. So as you can see, it pulls through really nicely. It's not too tight. And as you're doing this, you do want to make sure that you're kind of keeping even stitches. It's not very even right here, but this is kind of where it curves a little bit, so you kind of want to take that into consideration. And we'll just keep going through. And so when we are done with this, all we have to do is just literally clip the end, or cut the end of the yarn at the other side where we started, and once we're done doing the surface crochet, you just pull it through and it'll come right out. Oops. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom back out. And so you can see, we'll just pull this away. We have a nice curved line. And again, if you want to have a little bit more of a curve or move it, you can do whatever you want to do. I'm just going to clip this end. So what I would recommend is to create this guide on both sides and then look at the blanket completely folded out. Now because I'm working on a small surface area, I have part of it folded up. But what I would do is do the stitching on both sides, open up the whole blanket and look at it from, like, you can lay it on the ground or on the table and look at it looking down so that you can see how it's going to look before you start your surface crochet. Now we're going to do the surface crochet. So what you want to do is create a slip knot, and don't put it on your hook quite yet. So how we do surface crochet is you're actually going to insert the hook on the top of the blanket, and the working yarn is going to be underneath the blanket, and you'll pull the working yarn up over top. And so I'll just show you what I mean there. So you're going to insert your hook. I'm working about 3/4 of an inch above the stitch guide that I made here. And so you insert your hook and you're going to tighten it, but not all the way. So you want to leave it a little bit of a space on the slip knot on your hook. And then you're going to pull that up, pull that up to the other side. And I'm just going to do that again, but I'm going to zoom in this time. So you're going to insert your hook on the top, and then place the slip knot on the hook and pull it up through. And so now your working yarn is going to be underneath the project. So just working in these large gaps or large spaces in between the stitches. Here, I'll just adjust my camera so you can see. You want to work all these surface slip stitches in these spaces that you see here. So I will just go ahead and show you a few times. So again, you want to make sure that when you are working, you're working along the guide. Okay, so my next stitch, I will insert my hook. I'll just flip the blanket over a little bit, pull up a loop, and then slip stitch. And so you'll kind of have to fuss with the tail end a little bit at the beginning, but once you get going and once it's a little bit more secure, you won't need to fuss with it very much. And so you want to try and keep your stitches the same length. So loosen it up a little bit on the hook and then go into your next stitch, pull through, and that one was a little bit too loose, but we can tighten that up. And then just keep going, pull up a loop, and pull through into a slip stitch. So as you can see, it's coming along nicely. Now, you do have to, again, I would just highly recommend that you make a guide, like I explained previously, and just keep going. If you notice that your line is kind of squiggly, or I would stop and just pull out a few stitches and try and keep it nice and curved along with the guide. So we'll do a few more. So we'll insert our hook, pull up a loop, pull through. Oops, I didn't do that on camera, so I'll just So we will insert our hook, grab a loop, flip it over and pull through. So I know that doesn't look, slipped a stitch there. I know it doesn't look easy, but it actually is. So what I would recommend you do is just give it a try for a few times. And I do know that sometimes chunky yarn can be hard to work with. So you may want to try a smaller yarn, or a yarn that's not as thick. So again, we will insert our hook. We will pick up a loop, flip it over. You can also practice this on a smaller project, so you can just make a double crochet swatch and do the same thing we're doing. The problem with this is that this blanket is so big and it's a little bit cumbersome to work with, but it's still very doable, and eventually you won't even need to be flipping your blanket over. You can just feed the yarn through like I just did without flipping it through. Okay, so we'll just keep going and pull through. Okay, so that's fairly straight. Oops. Having a hard time getting this one through. There we go. And so you just want to be careful. As you can see, I snagged this little bit here, so I'm actually going to pull this out because I snagged the white yarn and you can see it coming through. So we will go ahead and redo those sections. Now this one's going to be a little tricky because I'm not quite sure which space I want to use. There we go, that looks really good. Okay, so again, it's not going to be perfect against your guide that you made, but as long as you're kind of going in the general direction, I'm pretty sure it's going to look really sharp. And so you can just keep going along until you get to the end, and I will meet you at the end and we'll go through how to finish it off. So we're just finishing up, so we're going to insert our hook from the top, or from the front to the back, from the back yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull that through for a slip stitch. Insert, yarn over, oops, yarn over, and pull through for a slip stitch. Insert, yarn over, pull through, and just repeat that until you get to the end. Actually, I think I'm gonna go, yeah, we'll go in that stitch. Okay, and now right here is more of a preference thing. I think I'm going to leave this white as kind of a border, and so I don't want to finish off just like this and then pull through, because it's not gonna stay secure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert, yarn over just underneath these slip stitches, and then I'm going to, oops, that didn't go as planned. So we'll insert under these slip stitches, yarn over, pull through as a slip stitch, and then we will just trim our yarn like so. Okay, and so when I'm going to weave these in, I'm actually going to, instead of going over the edge, which I want to keep that edge clean and white, I'm going to actually insert it in between this second last slip stitch, and then using the back I'll just whip stitch it down this way. Okay, so now that we have this done, we can actually pull out our guide. So it's not perfectly even, but that's okay. We will just live with it. And if you want to, you can actually make additional stitches like our baseball. So you can go up this way, down this way, up this way, down this way, and you can do that all the way across. So we'll show you how to do that after we finish our other side. So we're just finishing up, and actually I'll zoom in. So I'm going to show you how to finish the blanket if you wanted the red to go over this slip stitch area. So we're just going to do the last stitch here, pull up, pull through, and then what I would do is go underneath this, oops, I went through too many. Go underneath the slip stitch, yarn over, pull through a loop, yarn over, pull through two. So do a single crochet, not a slip stitch, so make sure it's a single crochet. Then I would go to the back, and you want to just make sure that it's secure so that when you pull this out it's not going to come out. So you're going to yarn or insert your hook into the stitch here, yarn over, pull through one loop, yarn over, pull through two loops, and there you will have an extra stitch. And then, oops, you will just clip it and pull it through, and then when you go to weave in this end, it will stay on the other side. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we are going to weave in all of our little ends. So I will start by pulling out our guide because we don't need that anymore. And then we're going to go ahead and thread our yarn And what I do is I just work my way along the back of the blanket. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom in so you can see a little bit clearer what I'm doing. I'm just going on either side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over this stitch right here. I'm going to go over that and then under all the other stitches that I did, so that it's kind of secured really, really well. And then we will just go ahead, oops, clip that, and so it's nice and crisp and clean. And so we'll do that with all the other ones, and then I'm going to go over how to do the little arrows, like on our baseball picture. Okay, so I've done the stitching for this side, but I just wanted to, if you want it to be like an authentic baseball, I just wanted to go through the direction of the arrows. So as you can see, these arrows point this way. Okay, and now when you come on the other side, they point the opposite way. It's just how the baseball is actually stitched in real life. But they are opposite. So when it comes to doing the baseball blanket, these little arrows kind of go this way, and so on this side you're going to want them to go the other way. So I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do the arrow parts. So I've completed the one side with the stitches, or the stitches of the baseball. So I'll just show you right there. And so I'm going to show you how to do that. It's really, really easy. If you have the surface crochet figured out, then you can figure this out really easily. So what I do is I measure in between the stitches with the tip of my crochet hook, which, sorry, I was off camera. So I just measure stitch to stitch. It's about, I would say, an inch to inch and a quarter, inch and a half. I'm not very good with inches. In between each little arrow of stitching that we do. So what I do is just move it up to the next one, and so my next stitch is going to start here. And so we're going to make a slip knot, and again you're going to be working, your working yarn is going to be behind the blanket. So I'll just flip it over, and there's a lot of tail ends I have to weave in, so I hope that you can see this clearly. So again, you just pull your slip knot through to the front, and so we'll flip this back over, and now we have our slip knot at the front. And you're gonna go, because it's going up at an angle, you're just gonna look for 2 or 3 spaces that you can work up into an arrow. That doesn't really make a lot of sense when I say that, but when I show you, it will make sense. So we want to go up in this direction, the way my crochet hook is pointing. So we want to go up here, and then we're gonna, once we get to about here, we're gonna go down to make the arrow for the baseball stitching. So I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook, yarn over, and slip stitch. Again, this is easier than it actually looks. You just got to learn to maneuver. Oops. I'm going to do that over. Oops. So go into the back, pull up your slip knot, I'm just trying to get my working yarn. I have a lot of tail ends back here, so it's a little bit difficult to find which is the right one. And so again, we're going to go up at an angle, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then slip stitch. And so the hardest part about getting all these little stitches is keeping your slip knot kind of anchored down, and so that's why you can't really see my hand, but that's why I keep my hand beneath the blanket, so that I can kind of keep control of it. And then I'm just going to slip stitch again. So I'm going to insert my hook, yarn over, which you can't see because it's under the blanket, oops, and then pull up a loop. And so this is where it can get kind of tricky when you're gauging which hole to use. So I'm actually going to use, I'm just going to get a small hook. And we'll zoom in a little bit. So I'm going to insert my big hook into this space that's kind of underneath this stitch here, and then we're going to go back down this way to make that little arrow shape. So I'm going to insert my hook, yarn over, but when you pull up a loop you want to be sure not to pull up the other stitching, and then complete a slip stitch, tighten that a bit, and then you can start going back down this way. And so I'm just going to go in through that way. And slip stitch. Slip stitch. And I should probably redo that one. I think I'm gonna go into a different stitch because that one doesn't make quite the same shape that I'm after. So I'm just gonna go into this space just below where I was. Space, and we'll do one more. Pull up a loop. So now we're going to clip our thread. I like to leave a long tail end. I know there's a lot of people who keep their tail ends quite short. I prefer them to be a bit longer. I find them easier to crochet or weave in after. So then we're gonna go back to the front and we'll just pull up on that yarn, and they'll look a little bit loose, but once we get them woven into the back, you won't see them. So you can pull them to the back if you want, or just leave them at the front until we weave them in. Totally up to you. But I'm just going to go over how to do that all over again, and hopefully it's clear. Again, the surface crochet is a little bit hard to explain. But again, once you get a feel for it, it's easy to do. So this one, I'm going to measure again. So I'll go down through this stitch, pull up a loop, oops, tighten that a little bit, and we will go into that stitch, but I do want to tighten that up a little bit because it was quite loose. There we go. So we're on the other side, the back side, to the front, slip stitch, and we'll go into the next stitch, back side, pull up a loop, front side, complete that slip stitch. And I'm going to backtrack because I think that arrow is just going to be a little bit too pointy, so I'm going to go into the stitch below it. So to the back side, yarn over, pull up a loop, slip stitch, and back side, pull up a loop, front side, slip stitch. And then, so the way this arrow kind of worked out is I kind of landed right next to this stitch here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to go across it and a little bit down. And again, this is all personal preference. You can do however you want to do your stitches. If you want them quite sharp and pointy, or if you want them kind of curved the way a real baseball is, it's all up to you. There are no rules. Not with this blanket. And so that one, I think we're good. We'll leave, actually we'll go down one more stitch just to clean it up a bit. Or is that too long? No, that's good. So we'll cut that one. And again, the nice part about this stitch is it's not as long of a stitch as the first strips that we did. So if you do make a mistake, you're only pulling out 4 or 5 stitches, maximum 6. And so I'm gonna go ahead with the next one. So we've inserted our hook to the back, made a slip knot, tighten the slip knot a bit, pull it through to the front, and insert to the back, yarn over, pull through, okay, and we will go to this one next, yarn over, pull up a loop, pull through, insert our hook, yarn over, back to the front, insert our hook, and we're kind of doing that same thing where we're going over top of the first stitch, or first red stitching that we did. And so we want to kind of go back down, yarn over, oops, pull up a loop. That's quite loose, so we're going to tighten that up a bit, and we'll go back down, and we, sorry, I didn't realize I was off camera. Pull that up. We have a few more to do, so I'll do one more and then I will show you how to weave these in. Just back out a bit. So we will create a slip knot, measure front to back, tighten, pull up our slip knot, insert our hook to the back, yarn over, pull through. I'm just going to pull back on that slip knot a bit, and then insert our hook into this stitch right there. And going back down, so we've gone up this way and we're going to come back down this way as we've been doing. And we'll do one more. Finish that off. So again, because we're working with such a big bulky project, it's not as easy to see exactly what we're doing. But there's plenty of resources on YouTube that can help you figure out how to do surface crochet. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do one more here, and then I'm going to come back and show you how to weave in your tail ends. So now that all of our stitches are done, we have to weave in the ends, which is the same way we did these long stitches that go from the bottom of the blanket to the top. I just go under one, go over, and then under the next one, and I just keep doing that until I go across to the other side. Oops. And then I clip that one. And something about this blanket is the back doesn't necessarily need to be pretty. The purpose of this is actually for a photo prop for newborn babies to have their photos done. And so the back doesn't necessarily need to be pretty. If you want it to look pretty, that's of course all up to you. But this I'm specifically making as a photo prop. So I'm just going to go back the other side. And that's how you weave in your ends. So again, the back of my blanket doesn't necessarily, I'll show you the other side that I have finished, isn't necessarily pretty, but again, I'm not using this side, I'm using this side, the nicer side. So I will be posting this blanket on Instagram. My Instagram is @hooks2hooks, and if you do make a similar blanket, I would love for you to tag me. Also give this video a like and a subscribe. If there's anything that's unclear to you, please leave a comment down below and I will do my very best to help you understand how to make this blanket. You can also reach me at my email at newmancc86@gmail.com, which I'll post up here, and it'll be available in the link below. Thanks for watching.